Let me start by introducing myself. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Martha Van Berkel, and I am the CEO here at Schema App. I did grow up in enterprise at Cisco. I spent 14 years there, and I have a technical background with a degree in applied mathematics, and I got to go to MIT for strategy innovation. I am Canadian, so I'm currently coming to you live from Guelph, Ontario, Canada, from our office. I'm not in a cave. Some people think I'm in a cave. I'm the proud mother of 2 children, and I used to, think my job title was for Chief Executive Officer, but these days I'm also the Chief Entertainment Officer when it comes to my kids. And I'm really proud today to be joined by Jeffrey Burns. Jeff, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Jeffrey. I am the Customer Success Team Lead here at Schema App. My knowledge graph includes the Maple Leafs because I am a humongous diehard Maple Leafs fan, as well as volunteering for Heart and Stroke. I'm Canadian. I went to York University for philosophy because I really like deep discussions and argumentation, and I'm happy to be here to talk about Schema Markup.
Sweet. So for those of you that don't know what Schema Markup is, it is based on the vocabulary called schema.org. There's 800 different types, and it's nothing new. It's been around since about 2011. And, it was created by Yandex, Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft. And we're going to nerd out a little bit today on Schema Markup. If you hear Jeff and I use the term schema markup or structured data, they're equivalent. So they basically, we'll sort of interchange them. We like to use schema markup here at Schema App because it really focuses on, being really specific about talking about what we're doing, which is actually really what schema markup does, as it tries to describe, your site's content to Google and other search engines. Now, today's webinar is brought to you by Schema App, and we know schema markup is hard and sometimes not fun, but it's something that we love and that we do every day, all day, 365 days of the year. And Schema App really provides full service enterprise solution for any type of schema markup for any type of website without IT. And our goal is to help you kind of reach more customers and be really creative and really use rich results in schema markup to maximize the effort. We're trusted by SEOs worldwide, whether it be SAP, Sonova, Advent Health, Keen, Upwork, Pizza, as well as different size of enterprise, again, around the globe. One of the things that makes us totally different is our customer success. So Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about what we do for customer success for our enterprise customers?
Absolutely. So one of the differentiating factors at Schema App is it's really a holistic approach to your schema markup. So there's a whole process that goes from strategy to implementation, authoring, measurement and monitoring, as well as your business insights, and that all just sort of feeds back into the loop of your strategy. And going through those over and over throughout the year and iterating on your markups, how you're going to continue to see growth in your website from markup. And customer success is here to help support each of those steps. So we can help you define your schema strategy, implement, help you measure the impact of the markup, and gain some insight from your website.
Awesome. So let's jump into today's agenda. We are going to cover some schema markup news, and boy, has there been a lot going on. I'm pretty excited about talking about what we're seeing around the FAQ rich results, but we'll also dig into ad IDs, nesting. Then we'll talk a little bit more about the schema markup process with the intent of actually showing you some advanced tips. Today we're going to talk specifically about schema markup for case studies. We're going to share some resources, and then our goal is to wrap up our content so we can get to all of your questions. If you have questions, there is a Q&A panel on the Zoom webinar. Feel free to post your questions there. I'm joined by Brian Tatarnik, who's our Director of Marketing, and Taylor Laporte, who's one of our other customer success managers. They will be sort of going through your questions, lining them up for us to answer them, and then also answering questions that they can on the chat. All right, one of the first things in news, we saw schema.org 9.0 released on July 21st. This is the 8th release of schema markup in schema.org in 2020, which is, by far the year with the most releases we've seen. What was interesting about this release is that it was primarily updates to pending. And pending is really the area where there's, still, I'll say, discussion going on, whether it's new properties or things that they want to add. And the key areas that we saw additions in pending were around product, specifically around product group size, pattern, collection. So really elaborating on how you can describe a product or a group of products. We also saw some introductions of learning. And learning, I think, is a really interesting one, especially with what things are going on in the world around COVID, because so many things have gone online. And then the last one's kind of random, but it's summer, so here in Canada at least. And so they talk about boats, so boat reservations, trips, and terminal. One of the questions, Jeff, since you're sort of hands-on with Schema Markup on a day-to-day basis, like when would you use like a pending property versus, or a pending class versus something that's like in a major release?
Yeah, good question. So pending usually has updates to the vocabulary with useful classes and properties that don't already exist. It's covering a use case that may have been overlooked or is now just being included. So if you want to be an early adopter or a leader, you might take advantage of these to try and get ahead of your competition. Usually we see, again, like early adopters and leaders just looking to try something different to gain an advantage.
Cool. The other key piece, if you don't know about this link, developers.google.com/search/updates, Google's now documenting updates they're making to their documentation. And this is a real gift because prior to this, like they weren't doing any of those updates, and it was actually really hard to track what was going on, something that we used to sort of, almost like crawl through and look for updates. The word clarifications is used 6 times in the last 2 months. And so what I think is exciting about this is Google is trying to help us understand better their recommendations, specifically around structured data. Remember, we talked about it being hard and sometimes not fun. One of the ones that I wanted to highlight that they clarified was around product-rich results, only supporting pages that are about a single product versus a category page or list. Jeff, again, like you work with a lot of our e-commerce customers. Do you want to talk about sort of like the difference between like those detailed product pages and sort of more lists?
Yeah, so you're only going to achieve the product rich result on a page that's about a single product or product type. So on your catalog pages where there's multiple products in a list, you're not getting the product rich result there. There's other strategies you might want to implement for those types of pages, different rich results you might want to look for, but for just the product, it's a single details page.
Got it. All right. One of the hot stories of the summer that sort of brought me great sadness was the fact that they've now officially said they're going to retire the structured data testing tool and really sort of almost like general availability, the rich result testing tool. Now, the good news about this is that it's being kept up to date with the documentation, and that it helps you see sort of, big check mark, right, that you actually can get a rich result. It does make it a bit harder to look at the different entities on the page or sort of how things are nested, which is something that we like. It kind of requires you to click a little bit more to find errors, and it still has some generic errors. But the good news is that all of our conversation feedback, all of your feedback to Google is that they're hearing that we're really going to miss the structured data testing tool. I think especially for more advanced schema markup and those of us that sort of think beyond just the documentation. The other piece that our friend Jarno highlighted from us from Europe was that there's also a good discussion going on in GitHub about having almost a testing tool within Chrome so that you can actually see the structured data directly in Chrome. This is also something here at Schema App that we, of course, have our own testing tool, and so we're looking to see sort of how we can kind of, I'll say, update it or sort of release it in a different way that would help solve this problem. Jeff, any thoughts on rich result testing tool becoming GA and we're kind of saying goodbye to the SDTT?
Well, I really liked how the structured data testing tool laid out the JSON. It was just a pretty view of the markup. So if you wanted to get into details of schema that wasn't eligible for a rich result, it was a great tool for that. With the push towards the rich results test, I like how it focuses on the rich results per page, and you can even see it in this example there. There's like 3 rich results this page would be eligible for, and we've seen pages getting more than 1 rich result for the same snippet. So I think this is great from just tracking what types of rich results can you expect to see for your pages in search.
All right, my next favorite topic, FAQ rich results. It has been a bit of a roller coaster. Just when we thought things couldn't get crazier, they did. So we've done a little bit of digging into the FAQ rich results, and we're seeing sort of the impact of the changes that's been happening in July really vary across industries, and specifically e-commerce, health have seen, I would say, the biggest impact. We are also seeing the FAQs returning and looking a bit differently, which would actually tell me that there's some different testing going on or iterations going on with regards to FAQ. A mix of 2 questions or 3 questions in the results instead of the standard 4 that we were seeing previously. We're also seeing some key dates. One where we first saw a drop on July 8th, and then fluctuation continuing through July 24th. Then we saw, in some cases, a second drop in August 4th, and now some are recovering. But we are still seeing FAQ-rich results. And I think, in some of our analysis, we're actually also seeing, the click-through rate and the impressions of FAQ increasing over time, quarter over quarter, as we sort of dig into sort of how it's trending as a performing rich result. Now, what we did is we actually looked at the different scenarios that we're seeing across different groups of customers, and we're seeing 3 specific scenarios. One that I call scenario 1, which is drop and maintain. And we're seeing this primarily be what we're seeing across our financial clients. And, again, that initial drop happens around, I'll say like 7:15 to 18 is like where we're seeing that initial drop. And then we're seeing it sort of maintain. You can see this data was pulled as recently as yesterday. The second scenario we're seeing is what I call the drop and loss, where we're seeing around that same date, around the 15th of July, a big fall, but then we haven't seen any recovery. So we're seeing this, and this is primarily what we're seeing around e-commerce. And then the third scenario is my drop and bounce, and this is where we see that initial drop. Again, that same date, 7:15, we see an increase, starting after the 22nd of July, and then we see again a drop on the 4th of August. And in a couple of these cases, we're now seeing a spike on, as of yesterday. Again, that glitch they announced, we're not sure sort of if it's a change or sort of what that glitch looked like. And this is what I'm primarily seeing in health-related sites. So what we are doing as our next step of sort of digging into the data is to identify sort of, where FAQ page is used within the content, whether it's like the primary entity on the page or nested. And this kind of analysis is what we would do, and then, coach our customers on those best practices. Jeff, any comment on this?
I think it's just interesting that it affected almost all the different industries we have customers in, but not every customer. Yeah. So obviously Google was testing things.
Yeah, some customers weren't impacted at all. The next piece that's been in the news that frankly was kind of, brought me great joy was update to the documentation. So on July 8th, Google updated the documentation for structured data on best practices. You can see the link there on the bottom. And it was talking about Google understanding different items on a page, and talked specifically around nesting, where if there's a main item, so in the example here, they talk about recipe being the main item, that when the items are grouped together under that main item, they understand that they're related. For example, if the recipe has a video as well as a review. And then they added this note that says, if these are items that are more helpful when linked together, then use ad ID in both recipe and video items to specify that the video is about the recipe on the page. Now, this is something that we've been doing at Schema App for a very long time, because our tool is actually built sort of using the same semantics as Google. And so the idea that you actually are linking things and also using ad IDs, which is, you can think of sort of as a kind of, URI is the other word, like a unique reference to something that's specific. So if you're describing your organization on one page, the ad ID describes that, like, this is the organization, and any reference to that organization should use that organization ad ID, so it's connected. And again, Schema App does this for you, so you don't really need to understand ad IDs, you just have to understand how to connect things together. Jeff, thoughts on ad ID and sort of like the benefits and sort of where you see it sort of playing a role?
Yeah, so the case you brought up is great. So you can have 1,000 products, that have a manufacturer, and with the @ID, you can communicate that it's 1,000 products from one manufacturer, not from 1,000. It's also great for just all of your schema entities to have its own unique reference or its own node. So you could have a page where it's your product, and then you could have an FAQ page that you hope to get rich results on, and you can link to it, say it's an FAQ, have the @ID, and just make it really clear that the product here is the subject of the FAQ on this in this other place. So you can connect entities and as well as your organization.
Is Google saying what we've always been saying around like schema connects to tell your story, that you should link and nest things, Jeff?
Yeah, it's great to have some documentation to support that.
So we haven't been lying, folks. It turns out we've been telling the truth. You should nest things and connect things using your schema markup. Now, nesting is something that we're really passionate about, so I thought we'd just take a little aside here and talk about like what are some strong connectors. And actually, prior to this call, Jeff, someone asked us about mentions and about, and are they the same or different? Do you want to just comment about that here?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all of these four properties here are used all the time by our customers and customer success team because they allow you to nest entities nicely. About is a really strong connection. The definition of it is the subject matter of the content. So that's your strongest relationship here. You're saying that whatever you're nesting under this property, it's what this is about. And mentions is an excellent connector because the value that it expects is a thing. You can put any schema class you can nest under mentions. So if it's on your page, but it's not what your page is directly about, but it's still really important, you can use mentions to call that information out. And it's useful in almost all cases. The other two as well, subject of is the inverse property of about. So if you want to have something nested in the opposite direction, but make it exactly clear that whatever creative work you're nesting is the subject of, that's your place for it. And has part is for sort of complicated pages where there's multiple things going on. You could say this part is about this thing here. So these are sort of the four workhorses of nesting things.
Awesome. Now, Jeff, you mentioned the Maple Leafs, and I'm kind of sorry to tell you that, your Maple Leafs are no longer in the Stanley Cup playoffs. However, not that I can really talk because my LA Kings didn't even make it into the the second, the COVID playoffs. So I thought it'd be kind of fun since all people in Toronto and Ontario are probably now looking to the Raptors, that we would use an example of just illustrating this with an article that's an FAQ about the Raptors. So could you just walk us through how that might look using sort of this whole nesting and some of those strong connectors?
Absolutely. So I knew that was coming. The Leafs are out, and that sucks. I think I might look at golf or basketball or some other sport that doesn't break my heart every year. The way I would organize this is it's an FAQ page. You have all these question and answers, like are the Toronto Raptors the division champions or the champions? The answer would be yes, so that's pretty great. But how do I know that all these questions are about the Raptors? And you would use the about property to nest the sports team information. You might even, once you have that sports team schema ready, use a same as property to reference Wikipedia or Wikidata about the Toronto Raptors, make that explicit. And then the main entity, question, accepted answer is the formula for making your FAQ page eligible for a rich result. So you need a question .name, you need an answer .text, and then your FAQ will be eligible for rich results.
Now, just because there's multiple ways to do schema markup, could you also walk us through if we were to then say well, we kind of want to talk about this as an article, how you might use different connectors to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really common use case. You have a page that is about a topic that you're an expert on. We might have it about structured data. Your business has it about the topics you're an expert on. And the article is the main content. So all of that's there, and it's great. But you also have an FAQ, and the FAQ may not, be the primary focus of the page, but it's there and it's relevant, so that it has an FAQ part. That's where you want to pull in that property. And then after that, your FAQ can follow the same strategy. You can tell us exactly what the FAQ is about and use the main entity to nest your questions.
So really, like those connectors in Schema Markup, you can pretty much connect and mark up anything. Is that
Right.
true?
That's totally true.
All right. If people don't know, it's hard to figure out how to connect things. And as a result, my co-founder, Mark, actually created a tool called Schema Paths. This is available for free on our website. So if you go under resources, tools, Schema Paths, it allows you to select two things. So as we have a mockery of the maple leaves, I picked sports team and FAQ. So you're picking like those two things you want to relate that are on the same page. And then we'll actually tell you the properties that you can use. So you can say that, the sports team has the property subject of, which could be the FAQ page. But again, that you have to sometimes think here about the primary property, right? So is the page primarily about a sports team, or we're trying to say it's the subject of the FAQ? Or if the page is about the FAQ, we really like that about. So this will give you some guidance. One of the examples I often use is like a volcano and a gas station, which are two types in schema.org. You can really link anything. And so this tool is really helpful as you embrace the fact that Google is wanting you to nest and define relationships, a tool that allows you to figure that out. And again, it's for free on our website to just help you not have to spend all your time in schema.org.
Yeah, the way I always think about it, schema.org is a vocabulary, and this tool just helps you organize the sentence. Like, how are you going to say the summary of the things on this page?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Because it's all about understanding, which then leads to findability. And what's actually interesting is that Google's been using the word understanding or help us more, similar to that word as they clarify things within their documentation. And so it's interesting because before they would often say like, oh, well, we just want to know if you're getting that rich result. And now they're talking about how structured data really helps them with understanding. And so in this light, we've actually released a new feature into beta with Schema App called Linked Entity Recognition. And what's really cool about this is it allows you to, at scale, link your markup to Google's Knowledge Graph, Wikipedia, as well as Wikidata. And so this is really sort of becoming more concrete and being more authoritative about, how you link to those, topics within these other sort of, I'll say like databases or Google's Knowledge Graph itself. And so again, we've been able to do kind of Wikipedia, Wikidata references within our editor for a long, long time. We've often recommended using that when you're doing same as on topics or defining, let's say, an area served for a city. And now we have the ability to do this at scale dynamically and programmatically. And what's interesting here is that you'll see sort of, the markup before. Here we're talking about, a store, Macy's, who offers Casio watches. Now you can see within the markup, we're sort of defining very, very clearly, where things are connected. Jeff, thoughts or comments on this one?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this because the way I understand that machines know things is based on how it understands relationships between two things, how it links two things together. And so in this way, we have a control to say, not only is this store, the letters MACYS, and however you could interpret that, these particular relationships are the ones that are important, and we're making it so explicit that these are the ones that we're actually talking about. So I think it's like whispering in Google's ear saying, hey, like this is the Macy's that I'm trying to reference.
That you already know about in your own
Right,
graph.
exactly.
All right, making good progress. Hope those Q&As are getting added in because we're getting close. The last piece we had in here was just to talk a little bit about the schema markup process. And Jeff sort of talked a little bit about this at the beginning. So strategy is, where we talk about, what is this page about? Like what markup, where should you even start explaining or putting together that sentence to explain it? And then we get into authoring, deploying it to your site, maintenance, and reporting. And we really see this as iterative. Again, Jeff was highlighting our customer success team really helps manage you through this process to make sure you're getting the best ROI and results from it. But it's also sort of through this process that you identify new opportunities, whether that be around content. So I thought we would tackle one of our advanced tips, sort of following this strategy piece. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about case studies. So case studies is one of those ones where, like there's no rich result for a case study, Martha. So Jeff, could you just walk us through how you might tackle this, through the strategy piece?
Yeah, I think it's really important to consider what it is that's part of your brand or your page or different silos or resources on your website that you want to call out and search, and that'll inform your initial strategy. Like, what are the low-hanging fruit that you want to achieve as part of an overall schema strategy, and tackle those and go through the 5 steps. So define the strategy for those low-hanging fruit, then deploy it, monitor it, see the impact, take it back, and then do the same for your other pages or update the ones that you have currently made. For a case study, it's great if you go from like 0 to 100 markup. That's going to look awesome. And then, same challenges with anything SEO or marketing. It's just controlling variables and measuring outcomes.
So what would you do on a case study? So this one, we have SAP, we partner with Acronym, an agency out of New York and us, and we're talking about like the awesome results that we've seen kind of working with them. It's an article, I guess. Like, how would you nest and sort of use some of the schema markup in order to kind of make sure that stands out?
Well, I like looking at those 4 properties that you had up before. We have one of them here, which is subject of. So first and foremost, and this is the same for every time you look at schema for web pages, what's the primary thing for this page? What's the most important piece? That's going to be your main entity. So article, this is an article at the end of the day. So article is your primary schema class, and then you nest everything logically under there. So the publisher of the article would be a schema app because we're publishing it, so that's nested. It would have a hero image or a relevant image. You can nest that in there. And then all the other parts of your page, the FAQ, that article is the subject of the questions in that section. And then, yeah, if you had, it would depend on the actual pieces for your article, but you could use any of those properties we talked about to pull in the relevant parts of the page.
And we're trying to really optimize here for rich results. So you can see we've written our case study with an FAQ on it so that, not only are we getting that result, but we're also getting that FAQ. Previously, before September last year, you could get, review snippets for articles and blog posts. That changed. And so you have to kind of switch up your strategies to see sort of how else that you can use it.
Yeah, I'd say the 3 most common rich results that you would want to try and nest within a primary entity or some other entity would be FAQ being the lowest hanging fruit. You absolutely should think about how you can take existing content and change it into a question answer format and just take advantage of it. The other one would be a how-to. If there's anything on your pages that you can explain how to take advantage of to your customers, nest that in there as well. And then the review snippet's pretty versatile. There's a short list of schema entities that it's relevant for, but it's a really powerful search result. So if you can nest that in your schema as well, I would encourage it.
So some tips and tricks around how you can maximize results on articles or case studies on your site. Now, authoring's the next step. And I'd be remiss if I weren't to say that, like you can author with Schema App both on single pages. So if you manage a smaller site or just want to kind of learn how to do schema markup on single pages, our editor allows you to do that. Or our highlighter where you can mark up one page and deploy. So if you're doing a whole grouping of case studies and they follow that same kind of templated fashion, set it up once, set up your tag through a tag manager, and you're good to go. And so if you haven't seen this and you want to learn more, we would love to show you a demo. You can chat with us off our pricing page or just reach out to us. But we're really passionate about like having you use these more advanced techniques. We have all the schema.org classes. You can nest everything, and most importantly, you can manage it from one central location. So we're big believers in don't spend your time writing schema markup, spend your time doing strategy and then measuring the results and thinking about what you can do next. So our editor is really set up to optimize unique pages, and then our highlighter allows you to do really advanced schema markup at scale. Now, one of our passions is around teaching and learning, which is why we have Schema App Live, why we're not just kicking off today, but going to do this on a regular basis. But we also have tons of resources on our site. So if you want to learn more about product models, we talked a little bit about collection pages. If you want to kind of dig into FAQ rich results, we did a webinar on it in May that's documented that you can rewatch on our site. Or if you're still sort of trying to make sure COVID information is being made available, actually FAQ is a great way to sort of share, safety and security procedures that are going on, especially in local business with COVID-19. And then also services, which we love. So we're constantly trying to update content on our site to help you learn. And then one of our things that we're really passionate about, especially in our engagements with enterprises, is sort of training those people to understand, how to measure success, how to think of this as part of their content strategy, how to architect content to make sure that you're really maximizing your results. So it's something we're super, super passionate about. Look at that, 2:31. Right on time for some questions. So at this point, Jeff and I are going to take some questions. We got some prior to the webinar over email. We'll endeavor to send a form to submit questions prior in the next round of this. So Jeff, you ready? All warmed up?
Absolutely.
All right, first question. How important is it to remove duplicate markup that might be on the site? So let's say you have a page that has lots, two products.
Right. Okay. So it's important. First of all, it's a best practice. How urgent it is to remove it can depend on what markup existed. If it's communicating the wrong rich result with a bunch of errors, that's a high priority. You want that out of your page. If it's just, your CMS publishes web page schema to every single web page, maybe a lower priority, but still a best practice to have, good control over what you're communicating.
All right. Next one we have is you mentioned partners and agencies. How does Schema App work with agencies? All right, so let me just, I'll touch on this one since we were asked this one prior to it. So we actually have a partner program as well as packages defined specifically for agencies. And so actually when we first built Schema App, Mark and I back in 2015, we were acting as an agency. So it's actually built sort of to help you manage Schema Markup across many different sites. So on our pricing page, you'll see the multi-site pro. So it's 10 editor accounts for $100. And so that one still has email support, allows you to sort of get a discounted rate for multiple sites. And then we also have an entire partner program for our enterprise offerings. So if you choose to become a reseller, you're going to sell and execute Schema Markup with, again, our support right there walking with you. We'll provide you sales presentations, social media content, articles and newsletters, access to a ton of education, access to a customer success manager. And we're actually already working on our sales and technical certification. So you'll actually be able to say that you are Schema App certified. And then we also have referral partners. So this is where you can actually get rebates based on referring us business. And this one is also available to people who want to do referral, but then we'll do all the work. So whether it be selling, maintaining, and doing professional services. So if you want to learn more, you can go to become a partner. We love, collaborating. In fact, I would say like as a company, one of our tenets is not just collaborating with our customers, but collaborating with agencies to help them be successful using Schema Markup. And that's just not today. That's going to be a really strong tenet moving forward. All right, back to questions. Here's one off of the questions. Do you think Schema is good for wide topic news websites? Jeff, thoughts on that one?
Yes, absolutely it is. Schema is applicable and important for any website you want to do well in search.
Awesome. All right, this one's another good one that I think something that we have a lot of experience with. So is there any advantage to injecting JSON LD or structured data via JavaScript? I mean, it could improve page speed overall, but I'm afraid Google would not be able to read it. So Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about how we use JavaScript to inject Schema Markup?
Right. So there's no advantage to having your Schema Markup server side or injecting it with JavaScript in terms of potential gain from having Schema Markup. Google's going to index it either way. The benefit would be coming from is that an easier option for you and your team to get the markup in the page? For a lot of our customers, the answer is yes, because we can use JavaScript with a tag manager to implement Schema App really, really easily. Or, if you're worried about page speeds or you want to be sure that Google can index the markup, then find a solution that gets the schema server side.
All right, next one. Is it okay to have two different types of markup on the same page? So I'll start this one off, and then Jeff, you can jump in. So this is sort of what we were talking about, like around the nesting in the topic. So if there's two types of things you're talking about on the page, so perhaps it's a product with a review and a video and an FAQ and an image, there is a way to connect those things together so that Google knows that they're related to that one thing. So I would say, better that, you can have lots of different types, but the intent would be to like nest it so you have really what we call like one entity or one thing on the page of where those things are talked about together. Anything you want to add to that, Jeff?
Well, yeah, this is similar to a question from Dwayne. And he says, is collection page an easier way to nest when you have a page that's about different things, an article, an FAQ, a video? And so rather than having all of those things as like top level entities in your schema, unconnected, yeah, use a collection page. That's a great opportunity for the has part property because it doesn't imply a hierarchy of importance. It's just this is a part, this is the FAQ, this is the video, this is so on. And it's unlikely that there's something on your web page or two things on your web page that aren't related in some way. And that relationship is probably important to call out. So find a way to tie it to a primary entity and nest it appropriately.
So next question I have is it true that about has to reference a Wikipedia page? The answer is no. About can be about anything. This is sort of where people say sometimes like schema.org is so flexible, but often like if your pages could be about a service or a product that you offer or be about a person that's in your organization. So it can be about something that's defined in Wikipedia, and then, hey, that's great, use that. But if there's also a page on your site that talks about that thing or that person or that service, again, link it back to that page. And then, that page could be the same as perhaps what's in that Wikipedia. All right, someone asked if we're going to have slides available afterwards. Yes, we will send out the video recording to be shared so that you can read that. We, again, love to share our knowledge. All right, are you ready for one? Any other great wiki databases for same as property type? So DBpedia is another one. DBpedia is sort of like the back end of Wikipedia. You'll see sort of Q references on that or Wikidata. And then Google's Knowledge Graph. So we've started sort of using Google's Knowledge Graph as a way to tie directly into entities. It takes a little bit more to query, or you can just use Schema App and we'll do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next one on here. Oh, do we have an opinion? Lots of questions on Wiki. Do we have an opinion on Wikidata or Wikipedia? I know what Mark would answer to this question. So in Wikipedia, if you look at the URL, often there's like a language denominator in there. So something that sort of says like, this is the definition of zebra, in English, and then there's a page for different languages. Whereas if you go to Wikidata, there's actually a entity page, so it will often have like a Q letter reference in it, and that's, I'll say, like the disambiguated, non-language specific definition of a zebra. And so my opinion would be that the one that is non-language specific is the most accurate and sort of the most specific, and so that's the best one to use if you can get it. But if you don't know how to find those or you're not using Schema App, then Wikipedia is better than nothing. All right, Jeff, did you find one you like in here?
Yeah, I think there's a timely question from Farhana. Their question is, I'm seeing duplicate FAQ page issue in Google Search Console, but I'm not seeing the error in the structured data testing tool. But when I copy the rendered JSON LD somewhere else, it shows the issue. We've ran into this similar problem where the rules to be eligible for a rich result aren't completely or perfectly lined up between the different sort of sources of truth. The structured data testing tool, rich results test, the enhancement reports in Search Console, or the URL inspect in Search Console. So Google's put a line in the sands. The structured data testing tool is being deprecated. Track it with your enhancement reports in Search Console and use the rich results test. If you see errors in the structured data testing tool, but you don't see errors with the rich results test, then you're okay. Don't worry too much about it.
Good one. Someone asks, you've said you should possibly mark up anything. Should we mark up everything? And if so, what will it do to site speed? So let's talk about first, like, what should you mark up? So I'm a big believer in, talk about, when you actually, if you Google like how to do a schema markup strategy for a website, you'll see we talk about talk about what's important to the business, right? Like, what are the things you want your customers and people to find? And so that would sort of be a good starting point. And then the question then is like, do they get a Google rich result? And this is, the question where you're seeing us say like, well, our article of our case study is great, but like if we could get an FAQ rich result for that, it would make it even better. So then you can actually look at, what content do you have on there today that will get a rich result? And then how could you evolve the content? And so this is like really where that process comes into play. And where, again, like our customer success team spends a lot of time with our customers, identifying opportunities to help the content they really need to be found and the topics and services and products be found, while also maximizing sort of how you can use those rich results. Your second question was like, should we mark up everything? If it's business relevant, yes. Again, we want to sort of make sure that we're like maximizing rich results. You don't need to use a million different properties. I think, Jeff, you often use like, don't take it as a challenge to use every property in schema.org.
Right.
Use the ones that are really relevant to explain explicitly what something's about. And Google recently, like they just updated the webmasters blog with sort of saying like, we're specifically looking for the content that ties to our features. However, other search engines might be looking for other things, but they've also mentioned in the same article that they're trying to understand the content explicitly. So I would say like, optimize the things that are important to your business, and then really look to see how you work on those rich results to drive understanding. And frankly, how you impact site speed is really more about an implementation question. And so, adding markup properly through sort of, I'll say like an enterprise grade solution or a solution that sort of knows how to do things at scale, site speed shouldn't be a problem. All right, other questions? Next question. Oh, I see we've had my co-founder Mark join us too. Mark, we're totally going to put you on the spot and ask you questions. All right, here we go. Where do we see schema going next? Oh, Harmeet, welcome. Bigger picture than pending schema, or what may come after schema in terms of what search engines may want in order to better understand the context of content. So where do we see schema going? Mark, you're the creator of Schema App. You want to jump in here and talk a little bit about where you see schema going?
Oh, golly, easy one, softball. Well, it's interesting, I guess, like where did it come from? Like it started with the 4 search engines with Google, Yahoo, Bing, and Yandex, and Yahoo's kind of like not really participating so much now. Microsoft's doing some interesting things. They're kind of keeping up, and Yandex also, they've got some good tools and some interesting opportunities. Google, of course, is leading the way. So that's kind of like driven a lot of it. Certainly there's a lot of opportunities, I think, for using that vocabulary to describe other kinds of data sets. So like if you just think of like your marketing knowledge graph or in analytics, you can use a lot of the same sort of things to enhance your analytics. There's some, I kind of think it's the schema.org vocabulary itself continues to be mostly like web type of oriented things, but there's no telling exactly which way it'll go in the future. I think there's some underutilized opportunity, especially around the actions section of the vocabulary. So how do you kind of like create these programmatic actions in the background? So like how you maybe load up your own application when it's presented on a web page. Like that's kind of like the first use case, but there's a lot of other kind of use cases that can come out of it. So extending, like using that and leveraging it for like a chat bot seems like a pretty good use case. But the vocabulary itself, I think there's just, it'll continue to kind of just go in the direction that there's sort of like a lot of use cases that can drive it.
Thanks, Mark. I think the other piece is, Google makes a lot of money through ads today, right? And we're seeing them change a lot of how the search engine result page changes to engage with people, right? So whether that be, the questions also asked, the featured snippet, changing how they're actually using schema markup in ads. So like, I think that might be sort of an interesting place. Like we've already seen them starting to do schema markup for licensing of images, where again, like kind of where image search and sort of, so I think we might see it sort of start playing more in the paid space, since again, that's sort of core to their business. Voice has, they've basically said like, it'll help us understand across any search platform. So voice, but we see it as like, how do you look at it more broadly within the enterprise? How does it enhance how you look at topics that people are looking at, or how do you use that as Mark said, sort of that marketing knowledge graph or data layer to inform other things. Ooh, I love the futurist questions. Thanks, Mark, for jumping in. All right, someone asked a core question. What do we mean when we say get a rich result? Jeff, do you want to address that one?
Absolutely. So when we say you get a rich result, it means that your snippet in search has been decorated with some type of rich information that essentially like you've received the benefit of marking up your page and now have this special decoration in the search results.
Fancy results, as I like to call them.
Fancy.
Someone else asked the question, is schema markup only written in JSON-LD? So schema markup can be written in RDFA, in microdata, and in JSON-LD. But Google has been very clear since about 2015 that they prefer JSON-LD, and it kind of makes sense because JSON-LD is sort of in a block, so it's easier for them to crawl in sort of one spot, versus RDFA and microdata is sort of in different sort of nested parts of the page, and so it's also more brittle and easier to change. So you can write it in the different pieces, but Google has been very clear that they prefer JSON-LD. All right, here's another one. When it comes to the Schema App Platform, does it automatically detect the kind of schema relevant on the page, or does some type of human have to use their brain to identify and look up the template? It's like they know our roadmap, Jeff. So Jeff, today, how do we sort of set up a page?
Yeah, today it involves a human. That your customer success team can help you if you're not sure what your primary entity is for the page or what schema strategy to follow. Although our roadmap, maybe Mark wants to talk about with being able to programmatically guess the entity of a page.
Yeah, we've been looking at this, and it's certainly a good opportunity. It's a tough challenge though, because of course Google has been trying to do this from the beginning. And they said, well, this is a difficult proposition, so let's add schema markup so you can just tell me explicitly. So like Google hasn't solved the problem. So to the extent that we're going to do something, it's just going to help augment the human. I don't think it can really replace the human, because even Google says this is a difficult problem. We need metadata. We need schema.org for you to tell us.
Next question, thanks Mark, is what is your view on the use of pending schema? So Jeff kind of answered this previously, like when it makes sense that it is like the most specific way to describe something, or if we're experimenting and wanting to sort of have you be a leader, like it makes sense. Schema App has all the pending cases because we're inclusive and sort of comprehensive about all the schema types that we have. So really it's not sort of, wouldn't be something we say like, hey, do it a core, but if we're working with an innovative organization that wants to be thought forward, it might be the best schema to use. All right, I like this one. Jeff, you measure ROI for your customers on a regular basis. How do you measure the incremental results after implementing schema?
So how do you measure the results of your website to begin with? Like what metrics are important for you? Clicks and impressions are generally important for everyone. So if you're looking at the overall health and impact of your website, Search Console and Google Analytics, clicks and impressions. In Search Console, there's the enhancement reports, and they will give you a clear breakdown of what pages are eligible for which rich results. And there's actually a little button on the top left. If you click that, it'll show you the graph of the impressions that those pages are achieving. And then from there, it's just tracking the health of your website. As we were talking about case studies, it's always important to track your other marketing efforts. So if you're investing in SEO, but also investing in direct mail, indicate exactly when those things happened and what they're doing, so you can help sort of pull apart different things that might be affecting your clicks and impressions.
Yeah, I love annotations within Google Analytics, so you can note those. And I love, Jeff, your point of like, you're trying to still drive the business results. So if that's booked appointments for your dentist, or if it's, leads to your enterprise sales team, like that's the end game, right? When we talk about, you're doing structured data in order to drive your business results and leads, that depends on your business. But the front of funnel things are what Jeff talked about around clicks and impressions, and Search Console is great for that. Or Schema App has our new Schema Performance reporting, which is also in beta to our enterprise customers, which will actually start telling you sort of, how are we seeing the mix of results? What percentage of that of your total is it looking for, to really help answer that question of what is the impact. So if you want to check that out, again, can't help but like send us a contact form. We'll show it to you in a demo. All right, couple of fun ones here. Do we see Speakable coming out of beta soon? Dave, love this. Gary Illis in a recent SEMrush podcast seemed to downplay the need of given Schema Markup as taking care of a lot of what's needed to describe entities. It's interesting because there was like a huge kind of like voice. I think it was like 2017, 2018. Everyone was like super excited. And then at Google I/O, May 20, what year are we in? 2019, so like a year and a half ago, basically they're like, hey, here's FAQ and how-to schema markup. And by the way, if you optimize with schema markup, it'll be like discovered and understood across all our platforms, in which they included voice. And this was sort of after they talked about Speakable. And FAQ is kind of brilliant because it's like question, answer. And if you think about your behavior when you're asking questions to your Google Home or Alexa or so forth, you're asking questions and answers. So with sort of so I'll say fast adoption of FAQ schema markup, and even how-to for things where you're asking for instructions, such as a recipe, I kind of feel like those two features are likely taking care of a lot of that. Here's a fun one, Jeff, for you. Do you see any changes coming for Google to allow aggregate reviews on services pages, or are they just gone?
Yeah.
If you know this answer, you should like buy a lottery ticket, right?
Yeah, that's right. What we need to do is get it like a spy or a plant at Google and to fix it from the inside. But whoever wrote that, I share your frustration, and I think reviews for services make sense just as much as reviews for products. But they've just gone through a bunch of changes to clarify and update how reviews function. So I'm not holding my breath, but I think it's a relevant use case.
Yeah, me too. I like services schema markup, especially like when a product is. And what I don't like about them actually not rewarding services schema markup right now is people are putting product markup on there when in fact it's a service, and so they're sort of forcing people to do less specific schema markup.
It's become a gray area because it's relevant, right? But you have to sort of find a way to do it.
Raymond asks a fun one here. Does structured data have to be in English? So the vocabulary is in English, so defined in English, but the content can be in any language. And in fact, Schema App supports all languages. So if that's important to you, check us out. Should all pages have structured data? I talked a little bit about that, about business strategy, that it's important to kind of think about what's important to the business and be found. Ideally, your site's actually built to where that's important, and then you actually just have to understand, how do you maximize the rich results there? Another one, Jeff or Mark, anyone that you want to jump in here? Oh, can structured data be automated? Oh, well, this one's just too easy. Jeff, you want to jump in on that one?
Can structured data be automated? Yes. And if that's your goal, give us a call and I'll help you set it up.
You can also use plugins for it. Jeff, good job. So Schema App actually has a free WordPress plugin. So if you're using WordPress, check out Schema App Structured Data plugin. We use it, and we sort of built it to make life easy, and it integrates with our app, but does really robust schema markup on there. If you're on Shopify, you can automate it through our Shopify plugin, or there's other Shopify plugins on there. BigCommerce also has, we have a plugin on there. What we like about sort of thinking about automation is, again, sort of focusing your time on strategy and sort of making the content updates so you can kind of maximize that piece, and sort of looking to automate it as much also so it's less brittle and can be automated. I see Mark wanting to jump in here. Mark.
Yeah, it's just like the same pattern of translating one data set to another. And like this is the common problem for like many decades now. So it's just like, is the data set in a form that is well understood? Like, is it in a WordPress database where they have an explicit structure around the content that can be translated to schema.org? The same is kind of true if you think of like your web pages as a template. Like, that's just another semi-structured kind of format, and you have to just like create the automations to translate it. So I think it's just kind of you can just rethink of it as a way of a kind of a data translation.
All right, just building on the kind of theme we have right now around WordPress, someone asked, does our WordPress plugin conflict with Yoast's plugin? We have a different approach to Yoast Schema Markup. We actually have been we like Yoast SEO plugin. So within ours, there's actually a little checkbox that you can turn off their markup. We really believe that, like the pages are about something, whether it be an article or blog posting, versus Yoast sort of defines everything as a web page, which we think is too generic, considering there's ways to be more specific. So our plugin works with their plugin, and depending on sort of, web page versus article, which is sort of a related question that we have on here, we believe like you should be as specific as possible. Which is, being articulate about it. So if it's an article page, call it an article. If it's about a person, define it as a person, service, product, FAQ page, etc. So that's where, Schema App and our plugin really, plays to that specificity, whereas Yoast takes a more sort of generic approach, starting with web page. All right, here is one. I'm interested in Jeff and Mark's commentary on this. Can Schema help with keyword ranking?
You want to go, Mark?
Well, I'm stuck on the question on the terminology. So in terms of keyword ranking, so like if we're just thinking of like a query from Google, just forgetting about the keyword for a second, but if you're trying to optimize for a specific term, yes, we typically see it can have a positive effect on that. It's not always the case, but I think you might want to just like think about how you can isolate a specific keyword in your structured data to kind of like target that thing or target that keyword or that query. When I get kind of stuck on the keyword mention, because that is, of course, that's been in the metadata guidelines for SEOs for like 2 decades. So that has, I think, predominantly not been positively reflected in their search results for the last 5 or more years. So if you're just trying to like think about just the keyword, just that meta tag, I don't really think that's like super helpful at this point. I'm pretty sure Google has spoke to the same effect, but more specifically, can Schema Markup help with your rank for a particular query? Majority of the times, I think it will have a positive effect, but you may not see anything, and there's no guarantee.
Jeff, thoughts on that? I can comment maybe from a couple of things that we've seen recently.
Yeah, no, I think Mark nailed it.
Yeah, we've been recently looking at sort of like share of keywords using SEMrush's report for some of our customers, and we are seeing sort of an increased percentage of keywords on first page ranking after putting in structured data. And I can think of like 4 clients I saw this for recently, sort of within our quarterly business reviews. But I wouldn't say that that's like totally corollary, but it is something that we're seeing, that we're ranking for more featured snippets as well as keywords, by watching that sort of SEMrush report after we do structured data. We're getting a couple more questions. We're just about to wrap up here. Just again around sort of like having different types of markup on the page. So maybe we'll wrap up with this one. Medical sites are one of our favorites. Can you use 2 types of markup, or should you choose one for a page? For example, if I use medical web page and a medical specialty for a page, do I mark up both, or should I only use one of them? Jeff, you want to tackle that one, and then I'll just wrap up right when you're done.
Yeah, you should choose the most specific while still relevant schema class. I wouldn't want to implement 2 different schema classes separately. You can use a multi-type entity. So if you feel that it's really, it's best described as both, then you can use both at the same time, but you wouldn't want 2 separate entities.
All right. We're out of time. So thanks so much for joining us for our first ever Schema App Live. This is something we will be doing likely every 4 to 6 weeks. And if you want to get our newsletter, which tells you about all this cool news that we're doing in written format, as well as when we're doing things like Schema App Live, you can go to the bottom of our homepage. You'll see newsletter sign up. Or if you want to kind of learn more about the basics of Schema Markup, feel free to sign up for our email course. And if you want to chat with us live, we love that. We love talking to our customers. You can reach us through our contact form, or if you go to our pricing page, our sales team and team is ready to answer your questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to continuing the conversation and making Schema Markup fun. Have a great day.